This is World of Info coming live from Studio 3 Radio Cairo. And today is the World of Info, but today we're going to talk about books in the world of books. Today we present two books. The Royal Tales of the Egyptian Mamluks by Ismail Morsi, and the second book, A Practical Guide to Islamic Monuments in Cairo. Definitely these two books deserve to be read. And you know the idea that I always say, should we read this book, skim it or toss it? And usually I'm biased to the time that I have spent in reading these books, and I think that they deserve to be read. The first book, which is the Royal Tale of the Mamluks of the Egyptian state, is a very interesting book by Ismail Morsi. Or it should be, call it 101 for the Mamluks. It's an introductory book that will give you an idea about the Mamluk state of Egypt that has lasted from the year 1249 till the year 1517. Which is a state with a very important state that has taken a very important role in the building of the modern Egypt that we know now. It's a very important state that has lived and had its own reasons for survival. And the reasons of survival of this state is simply the fact that it was a military state. The reason for this military state to survive was to defend Egypt and its borders from the invaders. And if we go back to this period in particular, we'll talk about the year 1249, which is mostly the last year of the Ayyubids in Egypt. There is the very famous king, Salih Nigmuddin, the last of the kings of the Ayyubids, if we don't consider Turan Shah to be a king of Egypt. The Salih Nigmuddin Ayyub had a very interesting hobby and an idea of buying and purchasing young children as slaves and taking up these slaves from Asia Minor and raising them for giving them an education, a sport education, religious education, and scientific education, and train them to be good and professional soldiers. They are slaves, but they are going to turn by time into soldiers, and these soldiers will be officers and princes in and out of themselves. There's a prince of a 10, or a prince of 100, or a prince of 1,000. That is, they are promoted, and a prince of 1,000 is always almost equivalent to a general, because these 1,000s are simply knights in shining armors. They are very clever in a fight and defending their own king. Salih Nigmuddin Ayyub also had a wife that was also a chosen wife who was originally a slave by the name of Shajarat al-Durr. Shajarat al-Durr, or the tree of the pearls, is a very courageous lady, a very wise person, and had one child from Salih Nigmuddin, and unfortunately this child died. Before that, Salih Nigmuddin was married to another lady who had from her a son who was in his young years, almost in his 20s, and that when our story began, and his name was Turan Shah. Salih Nigmuddin was an old man in 1249 when happened the invasion of Egypt by Louis IX. Louis the Ninth came to Egypt on the head of a very big crusade in Mansoura and Dumyata, trying to invade Egypt and defeat it, in order to prevent Egypt from reaching the high standard of eliminating the Crusaders' state, or what they call the Jerusalem Latin Kingdom. When Salih Nigmuddin found out about this battle, he took himself and the army and went to defend the borders of Egypt at Mansoura and Dumyata. Unfortunately, he was not feeling well, and unfortunately he died. Shajarat al-Durr kept the secret from the rest of the army and decided to hide the story of his death. And she went out carrying the stamp of the king, giving orders to the generals who defended Egypt and were very courageous. Some of these generals were very important in the history of Egypt. Of them we have to mention Izz-ad-Din Aybak and Zahir Babers, and of course Saif ad-Din Qutuz. These generals and others were able to not only to defeat the Crusaders, but they were also able to take him as a prisoner of war. Then when this prisoner of war came, his wife has paid a very handsome ransom to release this king out of custody. So Shajarat ad-Durr, after that, before that actually, she transferred her body, the body of her dead husband, to be buried in the tomb that he has built for himself in Al-Mu'azz al-Din last street, or Shara al-Azam. We can really find that this beautiful dome, which had the remnants of Salih Najm ad-Din Ayyub, and she declared herself as a queen, because when Turan Shah came to Egypt to try to become the king on the throne, he was not very trustful of the Mamluks of his father, and he started fighting with them after the withdrawal of the Crusaders. They decided to kill him, and they went into a duel with him. He got injured. He went up to one of the mills, and on this mill, taking refuge there, they burned this mill, so he got burned, and he jumped from the mill into the lake, and so he died. So the very strange story of Turan Shah, that he died injured by the sword, burned, and drowned. 3 methods that are enough to kill one person, one at a time. He was killed by these 3 reasons. So when Shajarat ad-Durr climbed to the throne, she stayed for some time as the queen of Egypt. She received a bad letter from the Caliph Abbasi in Baghdad saying, if Egypt doesn't have a man, we can send you one. So Shajarat ad-Durr decided to get married to one of the princes of the Mamluks, who she thought that he is not that ambitious and that he was acting very moderate and modest. Well, actually, Mu'azz ad-Din Aybak was not as humble as she thought. And she, after getting married to him, he decided to take the throne for himself and prevent her from the control of the country and the state as she wanted. By time, she felt that she is going to be omitted as a second wife of his. Although she asked him to divorce his first wife, he returned his first wife to be wedded to her again. And therefore, Shajarat ad-Durr decided from her own jealousy and from her own feeling of injustice to kill Izz ad-Din Aybak. She killed Izz ad-Din Aybak, and later on, once it was known that she was responsible for killing him, she herself was killed by the widow of Izz ad-Din Aybak. So, at that short period of time, what could have happened? But for Izz ad-Din Aybak dead, there was the other prince, who was a very strong prince at that time, and that is Saif ad-Din Qutuz. Saif ad-Din Qutuz became the king of Egypt, so that is he's going to be the 3rd Mamluk king. When Saif ad-Din Qutuz became the king, at that very critical time, the Mughals were on the gates of the Middle East. They have entered Baghdad and killed the Caliph, and they destroyed Baghdad and ransacked all the armies and all the countries in their way and all the cities. So Saif ad-Din Qutuz took up the Mamluk army and went with the Mamluks and with the Egyptians and had a big battle at Margdabak, which he used all his intelligence and used the intelligence and the wit and the braveness of Zahir Baybars, one of his lieutenants, who actually was not one of the princes that really was a big fan of Saif ad-Din Qutuz. After they were victorious and defeated the Mughals under very strict conditions and under very harsh conditions, on their way back, Zahir Baybars felt that Qutuz is going to kill him, so he decided to kill Qutuz. He killed Qutuz and he became the king of Egypt. That is the year of 1260. From 1260 till 1277, we can find Zahir Baybars taking control of the country, building the authority of Egypt in controlling and filling for an empire, an Egyptian empire, that reached the borders of the mountains, the north, in the south of what is now known as Turkey, and taken up control and attacking a lot of the citadels and a lot of the garrisons of the Crusaders, defeating them one by one, reducing the power of the Crusaders in the Middle East. As we go through this period, we'll find out how Zahir Baybars was able to build a state, a strong state that all depends on the shoulders of this intelligent, sharp man. Unfortunately, Zahir Baybars died in the year 1277, leaving two of his sons to have to rule Egypt for a very short period of time. These two kings, following each other, were removed from the throne, and to come on the throne was one of the lieutenants and one of the emirs and the princes of Salih Najm ad-Din Ayyub, and that is the Sultan Qalawun. Qalawun, in the year 1281 or 1280, became the king or sultan of Egypt. A man of great wisdom and a great intelligence, was able to build a strong country and a strong sultanate. He went on to control the sultanate and build pillars of a great country and state. Not only he was able to build a lot of strong army, but he also had his magnificent structures that were built. We know that the Zahir Baybars has built a mosque and built school and a school in Mu'izz al-Din last street, just next to doors to the Salih Najm ad-Din mausoleum. Qalawun built a mosque, a school, a mausoleum, a sabil, and a hospital, which is up till now running efficiently. Unfortunately, with the death of Qalawun came one of his sons, the elder son, and that is Khalil. And Khalil was a bit reckless, but yet he was able to build himself a strong army and was able to defeat the Crusaders in their last stronghold in the Middle East, which is in Acre, and force them to retreat to Rhodes and left afterwards. So we can see that Khalil ibn Qalawun, although he was a strong general and a strong military man, unfortunately he treated the Mamluks of his father very badly, and therefore they were able to get rid of him and kill him. They put on the throne a young brother of Khalil ibn Qalawun, and Nasr Muhammad. They thought that Nasr Muhammad, who was just 7 years old, will be a puppet in their hands, which he was for a certain period of time. So Nasr Muhammad went on the throne once and then removed, and then another time and then removed. And in the last time he was put to the throne after two of the Mamluks of his father declared themselves as kings, but yet they were denied the chance and they lost their lives and lost their authority. Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun was a great man and a great builder and a great intelligent politician. He built a strong country and kept control of the country until his death, unfortunately, in 1240. Since his death from 1340 till the year 1382, in 40 years, we had his children and grandchildren and even the sons of his grandchildren ruling Egypt as puppet sultans or as short while sultans who, once they control the situation, have been toppled by the other sultans, by the other princes and the generals of the Mamluks, who were always taking the chance of having a weak sultan on the throne to abuse him and to take control and get more money out of it, out of this country. So in the year 1382, this will be marking the end of the reign of the Bahari Mamluks. And Bahari Mamluks were the Mamluks who comes from Asia Minor and from Turkish sites, and therefore they were also living in the island called Manial Roda, and therefore they were living in this garrison, and therefore they were called the Bahari Mamluks. The Mamluks who were Jarkas Mamluk, who were coming from the other areas in Asia Minor, they were considered to be from the Caucasia. they were living in the barracks. Their barracks was in the citadel, or that's why they're called, on the towers of the citadel, that's why they were called the Burgi Mamluks. The first Burgi Mamluk was Barqouk, who became the first sultan from the Burgi and from the Cherkess inheritance. He stayed in Egypt for a certain period of time. He went to the throne once, then twice, and then removed. So we can say that in this period of turmoil of the Burgi Mamluks or the Cherkess Mamluks, we can see a big number of them have passed in and out of authority. There are 47 sultans. A lot of them were young children, and including the Bahri and the Burgi Mamluks, and some of them has stayed on the throne for very few days or few months. But still, we can see that how Egypt was a strong country. How can Egypt be a strong country in all this amount of sultans who have been changing? About 47 sultans in this short period of time can really attract our attention. How can Egypt be staying as a strong country in this period, in this short period of time, with the huge number of rulers taking control of Egypt? There are two factors. The first factor is the strategic position of Egypt. And the second important factor is the amount of commerce that has to pass from the east, from India and from China, through to the west, to Europe, through Egypt. And therefore, Egypt was always able to get a lot of taxation and customs from this amount of merchandise as it passes from India and from China through the Red Sea, and then to Cairo, and from Cairo to Alexandria, and from there to the whole old world in Europe. So this made Egypt a rich country. Also, the fact that these Mamluks, in spite of the fact that they were having a lot of fights in between themselves, yet they were all very highly educated. They were strong fighters. They were very brave soldiers. And the reason for their survival was the fact that they were defending Egypt strongly from the ambitious invaders who came, whether these were the Crusaders or the Mongols, or even in the end of the time by the Turkish Ottoman forces that started trying to take control of the Egyptian kingdom. Come the year 1492, and we find ourselves with the discovery of the route of Good Hope, and the start of the commerce going from a different direction around the Cape, around the road of Cape Hope, and therefore they don't have to pass through the Red Sea. And therefore, Egypt's treasury has declined very rapidly. Egypt has tried to revive this type of commerce by defeating the Portuguese sailors and navy, and had two big navy battles in which Egypt has allied itself with the Venetian business people who were living in Venice, who were the partners of Egypt in the trade and in the monopoly of the trade over this important period of time. So we can find ourselves asking ourselves how Egypt has declined rapidly by the fall of this commerce and by its failure to control the route of commerce as it used to control. So come the end of the 15th century, Egypt is suffering from the decrease of the income, and therefore the new coming up as an authority and a strong power were the Ottomans. And the Ottomans, of course, started first of all competing, had a lot of peace treaties with the Mamluk Empire, and once they have discovered that the Mamluks are not that powerful, they started their own skirmishes and their own way. And therefore, one the last of the sultans, Qunso al-Ghuri, who had a very big authority in Egypt, building a lot of beautiful structures, a great builder, but yet he was having empty, bankrupt treasury, and therefore was not able to build a strong army to defend Egypt. And at the same time, he was betrayed by two of his generals, Khair Bey, of course, the leader of them, who has decided to go on the side of the Ottomans and betray his sultan. In the Battle of Margdabek, unfortunately, Egypt has been defeated, and the defeat was ended up by the unfortunate death of Qansowa al-Ghuri, who found himself and the army lost. So the fate of Egypt has been determined twice from two battles. First in Ain Galut, when Qutuz was able to defeat the Mughals, defending the borders of Egypt, and the second in Margdabek, when unfortunately Qansowa al-Ghuri army, after being betrayed by his general Khair Bey, were forced to Egypt to retreat, and Tomambai, the last of the sultans of the Mamluks, he was Tomambai II, he started to defend Egypt and tried to arrange the army and organize the army to defeat the coming invaders, the Ottomans. And there they were under the leadership of Selim I, who had his advisor as a general, Khair Bey. Tomambai was defeated in Raidaniya and started a sort of skirmishes after that, trying to defend Egypt and trying to irritate the Ottomans. Maybe this will pass them through. Unfortunately, Tomambai was betrayed also by one of the Arab Bedouins, and he was delivered to Selim I. Selim I admired very much the bravery of Tomambai, but Khair Bey told him, if you leave him and you go back to Constantinople or Istanbul, you'll find that he is going to control Egypt again and will declare another Mamluk state. So Selim I decided to execute Tomambai, and he was executed on the gallows in the gate of Zuwayla. By the end of the Mamluk state of Egypt, Egypt has lost its independence and became a colony for the Ottoman Empire. This is another story. But when we look back at the Mamluk period, in spite of the fact that we had 47 sultans in a very short period, from 1250 or 1250 till 1517, that is almost 267 years with 47 rulers. Yet they were able to build Cairo, that Ibn Khaldun, who has described it when he came here to Egypt in the early 14th century, he said, I've seen the mother of the world. I've seen the civilization. I've seen the country that is full of highly educated people and full of richness and treasures of the world. This is how Ibn Khaldun described Egypt and described the scholars that were living in Egypt at that period of time. We get astonished of how the Mamluks were very carefully raised, not just as soldiers of fortune, but also raised as highly educated people. And all of them were giving religious education, although some of them lost their religion at the time, became spoiled by the authority, were greedy in the face of money and in the face of adventure, but yet they maintained a strong state that not only reached the borders of the northern borders of Syria, but also included Palestine, what is now known as Iraq as well, and of course Al-Hijaz. So when we talk about the Mamluk dynasty, we have to talk also about how the Egyptians fared well and how the sons and the children of the Mamluks, who were denied a chance in ruling Egypt, became good scholars and highly educated people. Some of them became not soldiers because they were not allowed to join the army because they were not slaves. So they became doctors, they became writers, they became historians like Ibn Taghribardi, and of course some of them has become judges, scholars, theologists, and of course this made them a very important pillar of the advance of the civilization of Egypt in this turmoil period from 1250 till 1517. So by this we come to the end about this beautiful book, which is the royal tale of the Egyptian Mamluk state by Ismail. So when we talk about this, we go further on to another important factor, which is the other book, which is about a practical guide to Islamic monuments in Cairo. Why should I present Islamic monuments in Egypt by Carol Williams and tell you a story of a practical guide? Actually, this is not a practical guide alone. It's a book that has been written beginning-wise by Richard Parker. Richard Parker was a famous ambassador of the United States in the 60s. He was the DCM, the Deputy Chief of Mission in the mid-60s in the American Embassy in Cairo. And after that, he was the American ambassador in Morocco, Algiers, and Lebanon. When he was staying here in Egypt as the DCM, he got hooked on the beauty of Egypt and the beauty especially of Cairo. He became very highly educated in the field of Islamic architecture and went on the streets of Cairo examining the mosques of Cairo as he went through by. And he decided to write a practical guide of the Islamic monuments, but not just any guide. The guide takes you step by step through the history of Islamic art and through the history of the monuments of Egypt. Not only he has described the Mamluk period, but he has described what is left from Ibn Tulun or the Turanid dynasty, from the Fatimid period, and all the monuments, the Islamic monuments that are in Egypt up till the 19th century and the early 20th century. This rich book, in spite of not being a big book, but definitely is taking you step by step to discover the jewels of Egypt. I really would suggest for our listeners to take this book as their, should we use the word Bible, around when they are going around Cairo. Every monument in Egypt, every monument in Cairo, you'll have at least 1 or 2 pages describing it in full details, with a resume about its history and about its background and about its current status and how it was when it was built. This beautiful guidebook was aided, Ambassador Richard Parker was aided by Carolyn Williams in writing the book. But later on, when he has been transferred to other countries and worked in the United States and then later retired, he asked Caroline Williams, because she was adding to further editions more input, he suggested that his name be removed and it will be the Book of Caroline Williams. This gives you the idea about this great ambassador who passed away in 2011 and has given us and given Egypt a lot of important information about the practical guide of Islamic monuments. The interesting thing about this book, The Practical Guide to Islamic Monuments in Cairo, is that when you look at this book in details and when you examine yourself and go to the walks of Cairo, taking this book as your practical guide, and you go around the streets of Cairo, after reading the introduction about the Mamluks by the first book, which is the royal tale of the Mamluk dynasties, we can really find ourselves into a great dilemma, because a lot of these sultans were puppet sultans, and a lot of them were staying on top of the helm of power for a very short period of time. To leave these magnificent structures, these beautiful Islamic monuments, and these treasures on the streets of Cairo, in these hidden gems, you'll really be astonished. How come these people who were not as strong or as powerful as all of them, and yet we were leaving these beautiful structures? For example, the Mosque of Sultan Hassan, who was considered to be a puppet and went to the throne, put on the throne once and then removed and then put another time, and then he died mysteriously, and his body couldn't be found. And yet, in this period of plague infestation of Egypt, epidemic, and we can find a magnificent, beautiful structure of the Sultan Hassan Mosque, one of the most beautiful mosques in the world, built by what people would like to call a puppet sultan. And when we go around and see that the wisdom of building huge mosques that will take the whole population, like the Ibn Tulun Mosque in the Ibn Tulun dynasty, the short-lived Ibn Tulun dynasty, you can see how big was this mosque to take the whole population on a Friday day prayer. And you can see as well how the acoustics were enough for all the people to listen in and to hear the sheikh as he was giving his pious speech before the prayers on Friday days. We can see the walls and the gates of Cairo, and we can see that behind every piece of stone in Cairo, you'll find a piece of history. Human beings who have been here and then, and building these magnificent structures and keeping their image and keeping their time. Well, this is a good book to be read, a good companion when you are reading about the tale of the Mamluks, of how you can really go on depth to find your way around in a practical guide to the Islamic monuments by Caroline Williams. So by this we come to the end of this episode of World of Info. Today I've presented two books. The first book is the Royal Tale of the Mamluks, State of Egypt by Ismail Morsi. And the second book, The Practical Guide to Islamic Monuments in Cairo by Caroline Williams. Originally, as the co-author was Ambassador Richard Parker. Have a splendid weekend, and I hope you can join me next time, same station in Radio Cairo with World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK, and I hope that you will be listening in next week.